Hi, welcome. Angelique here. I am talking about astrology today as it relates to the placement Sun in Aries. We're going to touch on how we can understand this placement and doing a deep dive into the sign of Aries and do that through mythology, symbolism, and the four elements, also known as elemental astrology. If it's your first time here, I've been a lifelong student of astrology for over 30 years at this point, and I also have a background in psychology as a counselor for many, many years and moons. And so I really like the deep psychological aspect of astrology to use to figure out ourself, our personality, any unconscious patterns. It can be a really great tool to figure out and understand ourselves and other people, our life path, and really help us grow. So I in turn use the astrology psychology model. So not as much future or prediction, but you can very much use it for that. And I focus more on Western and modern astrology because that feels more in line with what I do, which is using astrology to uncover things and find out about ourselves. And so that's the spiel. And so we're going to get into Sun in Aries, a very interesting and exciting placement to talk about, especially when we're looking at how to understand it, because Aries has these differences in the rooted mythology that the planet Mars is named after. But we're going to start with the mythology and then get into the elements and tie it all together, ground it, see what practicality and grounded advice we can get from astrology for this placement. So if you have Sun in Aries or you know anyone that has these placements, this episode could be potentially good at discovering or learning more about yourself. So, the sign of Aries, when we get into the mythology, it's interesting because Mars, the planet, is the ruler of the sign Aries. But when we look at mythology, we have the Greek god Aries, and then we have the Roman god Mars. So it brings the question, which one is which? Which are we going to do? Because Mars is the planet, is the ruler, but it's named Aries. And there's a lot of things that get rolled into one. But how I best understand it for myself is that Mars is really more of a military leader when we think about the mythology. But Aries is a god that was more about destruction and violence and aggression. So when it comes to astrology, Aries can have either of these qualities. It can be a very destructive force, a very aggressive force, a very violent force. But it can also be about leadership and control as a way to secure peace, because that is what the god Mars is like in Roman mythology is it's doing all of these things and commanding military or soldiers or operation, but the end goal is for peace. So there's a more of a benevolence to the Mars mythology, whereas Aries seems to just be about destruction and almost chaos in a way. We also know that Mars was married to Venus, and Venus was the wife of Mars. So we have Venus depicted as the divine feminine archetype. And so, because the counterpart is Mars, Mars is going to be what we consider more of the masculine archetype. When you get more into astrology and synastry, you're looking at relationships and romance. Venus and Mars are the two planets you want to really look at. I'm not going to get into that too much today, but it's helpful to understand Mars, and especially when it relates to Aries, that there's a masculine energy. And just like feminine energy, too much of it can be a problem. And you might say, Angelique, how can feminine energy ever be a problem? Because more intuitive and softer, but there's a passivity to feminine energy when there's too much of it that can stall progress. And so on the other end of the spectrum, when we have this Mars masculine energy, it can be a problem when there's too much of it, leading to too much destruction, aggression. In the mythos around the Roman god Mars, the way that he fathered his children was not great. It was trigger warning, rape, um, and sexual assault. So that's when you are too much in a masculine type of energy, can lead to control just for your own needs and not regarding other people's well-being, their consent. So that's where the line can go over. But a healthy masculine energy is taking control, leading operations, maybe even starting conflict, but the result is peace. And we'll look more about how that can be peaceful. But that's the mythology there. So it's a very strong energy. It can even be aggressive or assertive. It can bring a lot of conflict. So it shouldn't be very surprising that the element associated with Aries is fire. And when we think of fire, we think of something that can be warming. Fire is started with conflict, rubbing two sticks together or anything, the spark. There is a conflict that begins to get fire. But what happens to that fire really needs to be dealt with care and tended to. Otherwise, you run the risk of harming everyone and everything. I always like the episode in Avatar: The Last Airbender where Aang starts to learn the fire element and how to bend it, and the one teacher he hopes to have uh, talks about fire and saying that when it's not being watched and it's not being really cared for, it can be destructive and harming. So you need more control if you are going to work with fire energy and elements than any of the other elements, really. It takes a lot of accountability, responsibility. You need to have a lot of internal strength and structure to control it, because it can go out of control really easily and quickly can ruin things. So when we have the sun in Aries, we have another fire meets fire. So the sun is a fire element. Leo is the zodiac sign associated with the sun. They're both fiery and energetic and leaders, but Aries is number one, is above all things else about itself and its leadership and being in control. So that's the difference here. Is Leo can be a leader, but more of a guide, likes to grow, really likes to see humanity benefit. Whereas Aries, when we have this Mars quality, is going to most want to have its own goals met, its own things. Even though the peace from starting, say, a conflict, the result is peace, it really comes from what they think is more beneficial. So another way to describe that is Leo is commonly more seen as a teacher to see what is the benefit of other people, what do they need, and how can I help them. Whereas Mars quality a lot of times can be, what do I need and how can I help myself? Who can I use to help me get to this place or this goal, if that makes sense. So having the sun in Aries, where fire meets fire, can be a really great placement for being a leader and inspiring others, but it can also bring a lot of damage to humanity. I'm not going to get into it, but there are a lot of negative leaders that have brought a lot of negativity and harm to the world that have Aries placement, especially in the sun. But we also have a lot of adventurous and pioneering people that have inspired humans for generations because they were exploring or doing things first. So it's a fine line, and it's something that if there's a dose of empathy and understanding for other people, you can get what you want and need and be in control without negatively impacting or harming other people. So when we see Sun in Aries, the Sun is going to light up any part of the chart, and since the sun is represented by the personality and it's fiery, this gives someone who has a personality of being first. They are going to be noticed a lot more and have success easier when it comes to them doing something first, being the pioneer, the adventurer, doing things independently. This can also look like being bold or taking a risk, especially when it comes down to your personality. The sign of Aries also rules the head and the face and the body, so being dramatically expressive with any parts of your body can give a lot of attention. A lot of singers, especially the independent solo kind, have Sun in Aries. Dancers, playing an instrument, anything dramatic in expression, because you have the sun quality that loves drama, and Sun in Aries loves being independent. So that is one way you can really shine or see a lot of success and feel comfortable. Sun in Aries also feels really comfortable and, like I said, doing anything pioneering. So maybe you're going on an expedition, or you're exploring, or you're being the first to do something. So even if it's not artistic, so say something like banking, maybe you came up with a new way that banks can transfer money or something we never saw before. So it's just imbuing your uniqueness, your independence, your way to do something. Maybe you're taking a risk. Maybe you're doing something that people have been scared, a lot of people have been scared to do, but you go out and do it, and then that brings you some success and confidence. Sun in Aries feels at its best when it's being bold and not being held back. So having to follow things, especially things where you can't stand out or something you don't agree with, can bring a lot of conflict. So that's just a reminder for Sun in Aries to really figure out how you can compromise by getting your own independence and doing things that you want to do so you can shine and feel confident, but in a way that doesn't harm or negatively impact other people. Because as you probably know, if you have Sun in Aries, conflict is normal. It's a part of life. And actually, it's when done right, conflict can be really healthy. But we don't want it to, or getting to a point where other people feel like they don't have their own agency. But that's Sun in Aries. It was great to talk about, very energetic, and I'm always looking to see what people with Sun in Aries are doing next, because it's usually something not seen before or very exciting. If you have this placement and you like to share how this shows up for you, you can leave a comment below. I'd love